Welcome back, everybody. The rest of the evening is all about Ebony. This is going to be so exciting. So, I am going to, before we get to talk to the oh so creative photo director for Ebony.com, Keith Major, we're going to just sit here and just be mesmerized by some of the recent images he's taken. Keith Major, welcome. Oh my goodness, those images are incredible. Those are not the only incredible ones, but something about those images just speaks to me. So right now they're like, I'm just hung on to them.
Well, thank
Tell
you,
us
Ms.
about,
Brown.
yeah, tell us about those images. I am great and I'm excited about you being here. Tell us about those images.
You know, what's lovely about those images for me is I would call it a full circle moment in that the styling team that did the styling that was responsible for the fashion was Wayman and Micah. They're a stylist, in particular Wayman. Micah, I met. I mean, particular Micah. Wayman, I met later, but Micah, I had gone back to a little earlier in my career in New York, and we both have grown, and he partnered up with Wayman, and so from smaller shoots where we were just kind of like doing our thing creatively on our own time, on our own dime, just to show our wares per se, to growing to that space where we're working on bigger jobs like that with celebrities. It's really exciting, to be in that space with them. Um, Also, the style of lighting that was used is one of my favorite studio lighting styles, and it's the kind of style that I was in awe of when I was a youngster, looking at fashion magazines, where you'd see sort of like this gray background and the floor is a little white or a little lighter, and you're like, how did he do that? And when you sort of grow up and get to this space where you learn how to do it yourself, and you're executing it in a space with a celebrity like Jennifer Hudson, it's amazing. Then also with Jennifer in particular, that was my third time photographing her. But what I didn't realize, it was my first time photographing her as the main subject. The very first time I photographed her, we did an Ebony cover. And it's interesting because Ebony has gone through a few ownership hands. It's a legacy title, but the current ownership is the most recent ownership, owned by the Bridgman family. But anyhow, long story short, I shot her for with Queen Latifah and Alicia Keys. So it was Jennifer Hudson, Queen Latifah, and Alicia Keys. They were in a movie called The Secret Life of Bees. And Ebony did a cover with them, and they were all wearing white. And I caught a moment where they all were laughing, which is one of my favorite photographs, because it was just one of those moments where something happened where everyone smiled and laughed and happened to be looking at the camera at the same time. And it was like just a beautiful, very great sister kind of moment. So that was my first time working with Jennifer Hudson. And she was kind of the new kid. Queen Latifah was the senior sort of like celebrity, and Alicia Keys had done enough that she was, at least more accomplished than Jennifer at the time. And Jennifer was kind of green um, and very quiet. And so that happened. And I think that was a 98 cover, 1998, I think. Then after that, I would say about 2000, maybe 10-ish, maybe later. Jennifer Hudson was on Broadway in The Color Purple. And it was another Ebony shoot. This time it was different ownership at Ebony, but we photographed the cast of Color Purple. So it was Jennifer Hudson, Cynthia Erivo, and oh my goodness, I love this actress, and I am flipping her name. But somebody in the chat helped me out. She was in Orange is in the New Black, and
Oh,
the lovely sister,
full
lovely
figure.
chocolate sister. Anyhow,
Yes.
I photographed the three of them for God, her name will come to me. I photographed them, and that was my second time working with Jennifer. So this time, for this cover, that was September 2021. What we saw. That was the first time that she was the star alone, and that was for the Aretha Franklin project.
Mm. Yes, yes. And I just want to go back real quick and say, um, I'm, I grew up Johnson and Johnson, JPC Johnson Publishing Company. So to see you all reviving it right now, I am so happy. I think I told you before, I am loving these moving, covers. So
Yeah.
I'm loving that. Yeah, talk
Yeah.
about.
The
Go ahead.
moving covers are a brainchild of Mariel Bobo. Our editor in chief's name is Marielle Bobo, and she is a really brilliant visionary, creative editor in chief. And she and I had started working together years ago at one of the earlier Ebony Incarnations. And then for a little while, we were doing something that TV One had sponsored called Cassius. And it was at Cassius that Mariel was telling me about how she wanted to get ahead of the kinds of things that were happening to print media and how we were shifting to digital and trying to make the digital space interesting and bringing people to the digital space, and what could we do differently. So she was she was already thinking like, we should have video, we should have motion covers, our covers should come to life, there should be more interaction, the magazine format can change now that the way we deliver it's different. We're online now, and most people are not picking up magazines anymore. Certainly the young people aren't. And so what are we going to do going forward to disseminate this information? And so the motion covers are very, very, very much a part of what we're doing, and we're very important. I'm actually trying to look for a photograph because I'm really stuck that I don't remember that actress's name.
Park Boulevard is the best. They put in the chat Uzo Aduba.
No, not Uzo.
Not Uzo?
Not Uzo. I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna find it. But we could talk
Danielle
some more.
Brooks?
I'm cheating with my little
Is it Danielle Brooks?
Yes, Danielle Brooks. Boom. kudos to our folks out there on Chatland.
See, yes, that's Park Boulevard. That was Park. Oh, everybody, I have to tell you, I always have to plug them. Park Boulevard is the best. They heard you, and so they were putting in the chat.
Thank you, Danielle Brooks. So it was Danielle Brooks and Cynthia Erivo and Jennifer Hudson, and they were marvelous in the color purple, just marvelous.
Yeah.
Because of course, I hustled up those tickets, the free tickets, because we took the photographs. So I got to see the play, and talk to them backstage and all that good stuff. So,
hey, well, stay tuned for the next one. The next one is gonna be bananas. I'm hearing all of the buzz with Ciara, but I don't want to get off on that contest. Right. So, yeah, it's gonna be but so yeah, the covers, I'm loving those. Let's talk about the job. If you had to write, well, let's go back and say, why should somebody consider a career in fashion photography, and what does that role really entail, that responsibility?
Here's what I'll say. I say that if you're young now in the 21st century and you're looking at this as a career, I would say to you, do it, but make it part of your toolkit, because we're moving into a space where just being a still photographer is not the end game. And so you're being expected to direct, do some motion picture, and we're also living in a world where electronic media allows us to share and create more content in more spaces immediately. And so when I was young, where in the print world, where things took a little longer to happen, now things are happening immediately. And I just feel like young creatives today see more imagery, and so they get image savvy faster. They have more opportunities to share information. And so I think that they ought to look at everything in a even broader stroke, so that, like, for example, I teach high school. I teach in an arts program twice a week that a friend of mine started at a high school. And I tell the students, I think that you ought to consider looking at all media critically, and that you ought to not just be an audience member, but look at how it's being done. Look at the writing, listen for the sound, look at how things are shot, how are they lit, what angles are being used. And in my class in particular, I teach them about lenses, and I start to say, let's dissect this. Is this the longer lens? Is this the portrait lens? Is this the wide lens? Why would you use that? Why would you not use that? How do you want to think outside the box and break the rules? So, but in the end, I say yes, because one of the things that also happens is once you start embark on a career in the arts, and whether you go to school, which I think helps, and also apprentice, which means working under somebody, which helps even more. And then even participating, which is where you learn the most, you'll find that you will begin to figure out what works best for you and land where it makes the most sense for you. So for me, it was taking photographs. For somebody else, it might be a makeup artist. For someone else, it might be a fashion style. Somebody might want to be a fashion director, or maybe you want to take your styling out of the fashion magazine and onto the movie set. But there are many, many, many creative professions that you can find yourself in by just starting somewhere. So you might just start as a photographer and find yourself one day being a movie director, or maybe you're an art director hiring photographers.
Wow, that's very
But
good.
yeah, I say basically jump in with the things that you love and like, pay attention to the arts, and study it.
Yeah. What and when you're talking about that, the studying, jumping into it, what are some of the skills that they need to have to reach, say, your level? What are some of the things they need to do to develop? Things they need to read, things they need to practice. Like I
Well,
heard you talking about lighting. So
yeah,
yeah.
in every case, you've probably heard this before. Curiosity, it starts there, and you want to know why or how something's done, and you want to seek that information. It's You'll be surprised how much information you can glean from just looking at great photographers. And nowadays, if in my day you went to the library, but nowadays you can Google, high-end fashion photographers. Who are the top 10 photographers, or great fashion photography of the 90s? You can Google these things and start to research and look at the imagery, because one of the things that helps in the arts is seeing the arts. And so the more information you have, it's sort of like in the visual arts, it's sort of like learning math problems. Let's say if you're a mathematician, you're going to learn all the different kinds of math. You're going to learn about algebra and trigonometry, and and you're going to know, whatever it is they do, formulas. In the arts, your ammunition or your background is, or the science of it is the images. And so for me, for example, I can tell you that my favorite abstract expressionist is Jean-Michel Basquiat, right? And I can tell you that Basquiat might be the greatest abstract expressionist. You want to know what an abstract expressionist is.
Mhm.
One of my greatest experiences was I went to a Picasso retrospective, and we all know Picasso as being one of the great abstract artists. And this was a retrospective of all of his work. The very first thing I saw when I walked in was a perfectly rendered drawing of a torso. And I realized that this man could draw very well. And from that, he segued into abstract. And so then that taught me that you needed to know the basics of the science of the craft that you're in order to improvise.
Mm.
And so why am I saying all of this? Because let's talk about the Jennifer Hudson shoot. And so we talked about, the editor-in-chief wanted classic fashion. And so I needed to know what that looks like. How does that look photographically? And so that lighting that I chose was very, as some of us would say, very Irving Penn, very Richard Avedon. There was a certain style of lighting. You want to know what that is. And that comes only by studying. And I don't mean necessarily always being in school. Studying sometimes means doing that on your own time. When we talked about the fashion, she said, I didn't want it to look typically like what you might expect Ebony to do, which might be dressing Jennifer to look like the Aretha Franklin that we knew from the 60s and 70s, her heyday of Respect and Called Me, which is kind of like, and putting her in an afro, you kind of almost think that that's something we just might do.
Right.
I need to know what that looks like so that I know how not to do that. Um, then we start looking at photographs of the different designers that the stylists are suggesting, and we start to put a story together that speaks to the forwardness of the fashion that Aretha was about, because Aretha Franklin was a very fashion-forward entertainer. And so we needed our fashion to be forward, but we didn't want to make it retro or old school. We wanted to stay within that space that was elevating the style. But again, you have to study all those pictures to know what that looks like. And so when we have these conversations, if you don't have a visual reference point to work from, you may not get the best outcome. And so it's really interesting because I think it's not common knowledge that there is a space in the arts that becomes very technical and scientific. It's called, and loosely I would label it aesthetic science. Mm. And so there are ways that you can actually look at creativity in a very critical and scientific sort of way and break it down. Like, for instance, some of you may have watched The Godfather of Harlem. If you ever watched The Godfather of Harlem, that opening monologue, is all done in collage. Now that collage style is very Romare Bearden. So if I was the creative director and I said to you, I want a collage to open this segment in a Romare Bearden style, if you don't know Romare Bearden style, you're gonna fail that assignment. Mm. And so it's important, and it becomes that sort of thing. And I think a lot of people kind of don't necessarily take the arts that seriously because they think, science is for scientists, doctors, and smarts are for lawyers and business people, we all know the story of the creative person in the family whose parents didn't want them to, you're not gonna make any money doing that. I want you to be a doctor or a lawyer, And so you have this culture of not understanding that, there is a space where art lives, where not only is it cerebral, But there are many, many, many professions in the arts. Do you know how many people it takes to make a movie and how creative
Right.
all of those parts are? Or even on my shoots, I'll finish the shoot and folks will be, oh, you're great. You're great. You took great pictures. And honestly, I know that it took a village to make these great photographs. Like those Jennifer photographs, I didn't do those by myself. You know, I had a photo assistant who helped me with the lighting. I had a digital tech who was talking about the technicality of the exposure that I was doing. I had the stylist dressing them. I had the makeup. I had the hair, and the entire concept was the brainchild mostly of the editor in chief. And all of these people came from art school.
So, first of all, every there's so much I can pull from that. Oh my gosh, where do I want to go first? Yeah. Okay. So we're back. We understood there was some audio issues. Yes, Keith. Yes. So I think they got the audio issues taken care of, which gave me a minute to think. So art, that's one thing. They need to be studying art. Photo director. Let's talk about that role of photo director because you talked about your team. But as photo director, what is your responsibility? If you had to write a job description for your role, photo director, right? And make sure I'm using
Yes,
the title correctly. What, how would you describe your role as what's the job description for photo director?
that is a good question. Because photo director, for full transparency, is new for me. I've been a photographer for a gazillion years, it seems, and the photo director gig is new to me. I started in June of 2021. But my job description is that my responsibilities are to photograph and or direct the magazine covers.
You're gonna kill a job with it too.
Thank
I
you.
just gotta throw that in there.
All right, thank you. So even if I'm not taking the photographs, I'm an integral part of making sure that the execution is to standards. Um, I'm also tasked with hiring photographers for projects that are outside of our jurisdiction, which I guess means, like for example, Ebony had an event in Martha's Vineyard. It wasn't feasible for me to go do that, nor am I an event photographer. So I would hire, but it's my job to find an event photographer and coordinate with the events team at Ebony the who the photographer is, what the deliverables are, and what that budget is going to be. So there's that. Sometimes we have to work on photographs that are being used in other venues that we have that we own the rights to, and so I might have to be involved in negotiating those licensing deals. I don't know how clear I'm being about that, but I guess my job is to oversee the all of the photographic imagery. And so even when we're doing the motion covers, I have to be sure that I communicate to the video team how it is we're shooting, what the lighting is I'm using, what camera angles and lens focal lengths that I'm using to be able to deliver the product in the way that we'd like. I would have to say, for full transparency, that this is growing. It's a growing, even though Ebony is a legacy brand, we have new ownership and we're trying new things. We're thinking outside the box. Our motto is, moving Black forward. And so we're really pushing to be forward thinking. And because of that, I would say we're rolling like we're a startup, like we're a new product and we're trailblazing a new lane.
Moving black forward. I love that. You said two things I want to go back to. So you talked about standards, and I think I heard you say something about licensing. So it sounds like you need to understand a bit of licensing. So I want to go to licensing first and then come back to standards and talk about standards. So licensing, what does a photographer need to understand about licensing, copyrights, things like that?
Okay. Technically, you own the copyright to the photographs that you take. Legally, they are your property. Licensing is a term used when someone wants to use your photograph for a thing, whether they're advertising a product or talking about an event. There are almost no rules in terms of what you should or can be paid. You can be paid um, next to nothing, or you can be paid lots of money. That part is up to you and the marketplace. You decide what it is you'd like, or you find out what the market can bear. How I figured it out, one of the best ways to figure out what you can get for your photograph is to speak to someone who's done it before, or an agent whose job it is to sell photographs, or sell you. They generally know what the prices in the marketplace are and how things go. Licensing is a funny space because I found that it's more of a marathon than an overnight thing. You know, it takes you time to learn like what makes the most sense. But the at at the core, you own the rights to your photographs, and licensing your photographs means you're giving somebody permission to use them. And then there are levels. They're just using the photograph and they're going to pay you for using the photographs for a certain amount of time. Or they may want to own the photographs, which we call a buyout. This can be very cloudy because some people want to own photography but they don't want to pay you the kinds of fees that a buyout actually and ownership actually means. Because what you want to know as the creator is if you're going to sell ownership, then you want to be compensated in a larger way. It should be your highest price to give away the ownership of what you created.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, a lot of people want to own photographs. A lot of subjects say, I want to own the photographs. And they kind of get that wrong. Like, for instance, a lot of recording artists might say, I want you to take my photograph. I'm only going to pay you this much, but I want to own them. What they really want is usage. They don't really want ownership. They just want to know that they can use the photographs in the kinds of media that they want to use them. And so you want to spell that out because, you know, ownership is another thing. Because if they own the photograph, maybe Coca-Cola likes the photograph and Coca-Cola gives them several thousands of dollars to use the photograph in advertising, and then they get the money and not you, and you created it. And so that's why you don't want to give away your ownership, because you might be missing out on your payday for the work that you created.
Is that where, or is it possible to have royalties involved with that?
Royalties for photographers tend to work this way. Like, for instance, I'm with a stock agency called Getty with some of my older photographs, and every now and then photographs will sell that I've done of celebrities or dignitaries, and they'll be used for different things, and I'll get a check for the usage. That's kind of like a royalty. You don't get royalties the same way that someone who it was a recording artist might get a royalty. Your royalties come in reselling of photographs. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned standards. Talk about some of the standards that, a photographer should be thinking about when producing, and I guess we're talking editorial.
It's funny. Now, the crazy thing about the arts is that it's subjective. And I guess what I mean by that is every viewer has a different viewpoint. Everybody has different taste level. Not everybody's interested in the same thing. However, when we're talking standards, we're talking knowing how to light something, knowing how to create proper exposure. And if you want to bend those rules, and make something interesting that kind of isn't the standard thing. Knowing why you're doing that will help you stay in the business and allow you to recreate your results. Because basically, you want to establish some kind of standard, some kind of quality control so that you have control, so that you are creating the images that you want to create in the way that you want to create them. If every image you create is an accident or a lucky shot, you might find that you're not able to sustain the kind of career that you'd like to sustain. And so if you are able to understand and respect the standards of exposure and camera speeds and lenses and things of that nature, you'll be better off for it. And
Mm.
also you'll be able to communicate what it is you'd like to do with your colleagues. So for instance, there are times when I'm on set and I'm talking to my assistants, and we have to have a basic root understanding of photo science to be able to communicate so that I can ask for it is what I want. Or even if I'm given advice on something, I have to have a basic root understanding of it so that when the comes to me, I'm able to receive it.
Wow, and you said photo science. That's the first time I ever heard that used.
Yeah. One of the first things you learn as a photographer is how amazing the eye is. God is no joke. And that eye does things, baby, that we have only scratched the surface of and that's the first thing you learn, because your eyes are fixing things, rearranging light all the time. And you pick up a camera and you're like, wait a minute, why is this so dark? Or why is this so light? Because the camera is not as sophisticated as the eye. And so now you have to learn how to use the tools of photography to get the results that you want. You've got to learn all the settings so that you can create the images the way you'd like them to look. It's a science.
Whew.
I remember one instructor said it is not much of a science. He didn't think it was very scientific at all. but for me, there is a math. It's like a 3-step math. There's ISO, which is a thing that we used to call film speed, but it's like the rating or the sensitivity and you have to mix that with the aperture, which is the lens opening, and then how long the light comes in, which is the shutter speed. And you have to combine those 3 things. And for some of us, it's challenging.
Hmm. Let's see. I'm looking at the time. If anyone has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. So once we get to that point, I can share them with Keith.
Mhm.
Time moves so fast.
Yeah, always.
Talk about what's a week in your life look like, and talk about the calendar for creating the covers.
Wow, that's a broad question. Uh, let's talk about this particular week. And so I'm not at home right now. Monday morning at about 4 a.m., I got up, got myself together to get to the airport to fly to Los Angeles. I met the editor in chief and the creative director. We met at the airport and flew here to LA. And we got into our apartment, I guess Monday afternoon, and then we immediately started talking to everyone that was involved in our production for the next day. We had to make sure the studio we secured was secure. We had to make sure that the COVID tester that we hired was going to come at the right time. We had to find out, when is the subject coming? Is everything that we had planned in place? And there's always sometimes last minute things that have to be taken care of. And so when we're on our computers and doing all that and on our phones and figuring all that out, and we get to bed at a decent hour, and then the next morning we get up, go to the location, and then it becomes looking at our mood boards and looking at the lay of the land and working with the assistants, the hair and the makeup, and figuring it all out. So we start putting the production together. And at first you walk in and it's almost like, is this really going to happen? It's almost like, can we make this happen? Sometimes it feels like it's not going to happen. And then by late morning, it's running like a well-oiled machine, and you start taking photographs. And by the end of the day, the photographs are done and you break down. And I sort of like really skimmed over that. But that was a typical day. But then while that's happening, we know that we have another shoot day the next day. And so the process begins again. As I'm shutting one shoot down, we're planning for the next one. And we get up the next day and execute that. So this week we photographed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, today, Friday. We were supposed to shoot Saturday, and literally for 3 days, my editor-in-chief was going back and forth with a celebrity who got pulled away from us for Oscars, because there's the Oscar weekend in Los Angeles this weekend. And so we had to deal with, well, what dates, and we spent a lot of time trying to find ways to work around the celebrity's schedule. Like, well, can we do this time? What can we do that time? What can we do it here? Can we do it there? What are the logistics? How far is it? There are a lot of moving parts that you have to be a part of, and it's not a 9 to 5. It's, if you listen to that story, what you may have taken from that story is we worked a lot. We were working early in the morning. We were working after the shoot day. Right now, the editor-in-chief and creative director are out running errands connected to the shoots that we did this week. And as soon as I'm done with this call, I'm going to have to look at photographs and process things and go over what's going to happen next. And so I think maybe the best way to describe it, because it's hard to talk about it and really know. But I want to prepare those who are listening who don't know for what it's like. I remember one Friday afternoon, Friday evening, might have been 5 o'clock in the summer. And I'm running around preparing for a shoot that I'm going to do the next day. And I walked by a outdoor cafe, and I saw people laughing and joking and having a good time. And I said to myself, this is when the 9 to 5 looks sexier than freelance life. Because they had not a care in the word, because they had a job. And the job it's their problem to worry about all the nuts and bolts. You just have to do your job, get your check, and then Friday comes and you got your weekend. Well, in the arts, if you want to win in the arts, it's not really that kind of space. You have to be, my job description when I was hired was asked that I be available on weekends. It asked that I be available after hours, because the job sometimes requires that. And for me, I feel like I'm always on, because even if I watch a movie, I'm not just watching a movie. I mean, I might be entertained, and I am entertained, and I enjoy it, but I'm looking at the lighting. I'm looking at the camera angles. I'm looking at the style. I'm taking in the energy of the production, and how does that connect with the style of what they're trying to say, or the style of how things are. Like, for example, there's a show that's very popular called Euphoria. And for a lot of young creatives, it's a must watch, because they're very aggressive with their lighting. They're very aggressive with how they use camera angles. They're doing some very unique things. For a while, they were very aggressive with makeup. It was almost like, I remember there was a time where we would refer to a certain style of makeup as Euphoria makeup. And so I guess I'm losing my place, because there's so many things that go into a creative profession, that it's a lifestyle. It's not just a job. I love it. And you have to love it, because you're going to be asked to do a lot. A lot is going to be asked of you if you do very well.
That's good. I'd like to qualify my next question, because I always tell people I do not ask people what they make. That is nobody's business. But I know everybody wants to have that's that thought, incrementally, progression wise, 3-5 years down the road, starting out as a photographer, what type of income can someone anticipate?
Oh, well, I can tell you this much. The first time that the money thing came up, because I was the kind of kid who went to school for, as much as I loved the arts, I went to school for it. So I went to school, went to the High School of Art and Design. Actually, before the high school, I went to Pratt Institute and Brooklyn Museum and took photo classes. Went to the High School of Art and Design. And in college, I went to the RIT for photography. In RIT, they told us you were not going to make money. You're going to start to see some money in your 30s, which is scary when you're in college in your 20s to hear that. And then they said, you're not going to make any real money until your 40s. They were right. That's what happened for me. And so basically, what I can tell you is when I first got out of college, I was making what assistants make, which at that time was maybe $150 a day or a few $100s a week, which was almost nothing. But the understanding was when you were working with professionals, you were going to learn how to do this, and eventually you were going to make money. So then after that, after assisting for about a year and making no money, I learned as much as I could, as much as I, was going to make sense for me. And so then I took a job at a photo studio where I was making more money. So now I'm making a entry-level salary, but I had a job as a photographer slash studio production manager. It was a studio that was photographing art. And I think at that time, we're talking late 90s, no, late 80s, early 90s. And I was making as little, I was making maybe $30,000 a year, which was okay, but not great. It's very low pay. But I took that job because it was a steady check. And what I was doing was I told myself, I'm going to start doing my own work, evenings, weekends, take a job when I could. And my plan was to build my freelance career after work, in and around work, and try to get busy enough that either they would fire me because I was taking too many days off or doing my own thing, or I could quit. And the latter happened. I ended up making enough money that I could quit. And when I knew I could quit was I had 1 year in 95 where, while still holding a job, I billed $300,000. So I made $300,000 taking days off, working after work, working on the weekends.
That ain't too bad.
That's not too bad. So that's when I quit. And so that's where you could be. That was one good year. One of the things that anyone in business knows, you have up and down years. I didn't always make that. And I certainly didn't always take it all home because they were expenses. And you tend to have to reinvest in the business. So there were years where I made much, much less. There were times where I struggled. But I know that for me as a photographer and in this life as a creative, it's a marathon. And so, I have had ups and downs, but I've always did good photographs. I have a long career and I've made a good name for myself. And so, during the up years, I remember for years I had a campaign with Procter & Gamble called My Black is Beautiful that paid me very well. So, but it's really all over the map. So I'm going to be completely transparent. There may be days where I'm doing what someone might call a favor or a small budget shoot. And, it might only be for hundreds of dollars. And then I might be shooting something that's advertising that's several thousands of dollars. It's really all over the map and it really depends on the job. But you can make a good living. And certainly there are some young photographers, younger than me, who are doing very well out there, who have exceeded what I have done, which is how it should be. And I expect many of the young people here listening to this, I fully expect you to do more than I did. I expect you to be better than me. I expect you to elevate the craft. That's how it goes, and that's what we're looking for. we're looking to see you like grow and win and take, you know, that next step forward. I
Amazing.
hope I've answered that question.
You you went more in depth than I expected you to. Um,
Yeah, I was very, I gave a lot there.
you
But yeah, and my
you're
thing
good
was
at
always,
gleaning.
yeah, and my thing was always I like to work and I like to shoot, and sometimes I want to help. And so there are times where you're gonna get me and it's gonna be like, okay, I'll do this for you and I'll I'll give you a break on the price just because I want you to have a good photograph, you know.
Mm, that's when you're called to do something. I
I
have,
think I've been called.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I mean, I
have,
think you and I talked because I know that for me, I feel like my God-given gift is that I see everyone out of my eyes at their best. Like it's not even about the photography. Literally every day out of my eyes, I see everyone's beauty. And so my task has been to try to translate that in photographically. But when I'm walking down the street, I'm sitting on my, you know, here looking at you, it's like beautiful. Like that's just all I see. You know, I see everyone's beauty, and
mm,
it's a lovely blessing. It's a great thing. I wish I'm looking for the technology where there's a chip in my head that I can record the things that I see in my eyes. You know,
ooh.
because like I said at the top of this conversation, you know that God is no joke, and that eye is something else, boy. Whew, the
Wow.
things that I can do.
Especially when it's trained. Um, okay, so I have one question. I have two questions, and then we're going to wrap up.
Hmm.
One question from the audience is, how big was your team when you did the shoot for the HBCU STEM Queens? It was beautiful work.
Thank you. That team was big. We had myself, digital tech, which somebody who's pretty much mans a computer, a first assistant, a second assistant. Oh, someone, they're coming in. Hold on one second. Hold on one second.
For everybody, we are going to be getting ready for the Ebony Fashion Fair, exploration through that.
Sorry about that. You know, it's an Airbnb. I didn't know what to do. Um,
That's okay.
uh, let's see. So that was we had a set designer, somebody to have props, and the set designer had three people. It was he and two other people. So now we're talking seven. We had our editor in chief, our creative director. That's eight. Stylist assistants. That's about 12 people. Um, we needed makeup and hair for 10 women. So we had maybe 5 stations. So that's at least 5 more people. So that's now we're talking 17 people. The Procter and Gamble, no, the Oil of Olay was sponsoring it. The Olay rep was there. We had the 10 girls, their parents. It was a huge crew. So I would imagine that, what, is that like 25, 30 people? It was a big set.
Well,
It took a long time. Took a long time, very detailed shoot. And those girls were young women. Those young women were amazing. They were all extremely bright, extremely well-mannered, and you know, just amazing, amazing women. We have a bright, bright future. Those sisters were brilliant.
Mm. Well, as we're wrapping up and preparing for the next segment, Keith, this has been amazing. Definitely looking to many more conversations with you. 60 seconds. What is it, food for thought for those, whether they're in that 18 to 44 range, for pursuing a career in photography? What should be at the forefront of their mind?
Uh, there was there's a photograph of a quote from Jay-Z that said the greatest thing that we did was we never gave up. I that was the one thing that I told myself over the years, that no matter what happened, this is what I wanted to do, and I'm gonna do my best to do it. Life, you know, the universe, God, whatever, however your spirituality runs, you'll find your way. And if you find that it's not working, the universe will give you a way that it is working. Maybe because maybe you're not the photographer. Like for instance, there's a guy that I work with here in Los Angeles who's become one of my favorite assistants, and he's been brilliant with light. And I used to help him like sort of get started in photography. I would give him tips. I would, you know, let him know of clients or people that were looking for stuff when I wasn't in town. But he said to me, you know what I found? He says, in my journey, I realized that I enjoyed just doing the lighting. And I've really found my stride in helping other people light. And now I have a company. Describe the company that he's built by just supplying equipment and supplying lighting and helping people on set. But he found that journey by just doing the photography, doing the work, until he found the space that worked best for him. So I say, keep doing it. Do not give up. You know, there's space for you, because there are a lot, like that earlier question, how many people were on set? There were a lot of creative people on that set for that HBCU Queens. Yeah. All creatives. So you can be there too.
That wraps it up. Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome. Right. Thank you for having me. I hope I was helpful.
You were very, very helpful. So thank you very much. And everybody, we will see you back. We're actually going to start at about 6:55 around there. So stay tuned, and we're going to take an exploration through the cultural phenomenon, the Ebony Fashion Fair Traveling Fashion Show. Thank you, Keith. Talk with you soon.
Thank you, Carla.
Bye.
Bye-bye.